With the NBA trade deadline just a little over a week away, I came up with 5 trades that I think would benefit both teams in participating, and we're going to dive in and look at them on this episode of Swish City. I am Bruce Velez. And before we dive into this video, I just want to give a quick disclaimer for these trades. One, there is no Jimmy Butler trade, as I've talked about Jimmy Butler on multiple other channels and stuff like that that I do work for. And honestly, I'm just sick and tired of talking about Jimmy Butler in a possible trade. And these are trades that are kind of, creative ones, I would say. And secondly, I would also like to preface that most of these trades don't have draft capital. Some of them don't have draft capital, and that's because I don't necessarily know what draft capital would be used in some of these moves. So ultimately, that is going to be the case for some of these moves, and you can ultimately plug and play them. But let me know what you think down below in the comment section. Without further ado, let's dive in and let's look at this first trade. So this first trade here has the Magic and Utah Jazz doing a deal in which the Magic are acquiring Colin Sexton and Svi Mykhailiuk in order to send out Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, and Jet Howard. And like I said, there is no draft capital in this trade. There might need to be a couple seconds possibly thrown in here. But ultimately, I do think this trade is ultimately fair and would benefit both parties. For the Magic, they're obviously getting a guy in Colin Sexton, who is a pretty solid backup point guard and would be a very, really great one for this Orlando Magic team. They've dealt with numerous amount of injuries to Paolo, to Franz Wagner, to Jalen Suggs, and having another shot creator in that offense would be great. KCP has been a great addition defensively, but offensively has shown some shooting struggles. So having another great scorer offensively in the guard position in Colin Sexton, a veteran, is great. And adding some more shooting in Svi Mykhailiuk, who was on the NBA champion Boston Celtics last season, even though he didn't play a big role, was key as a catch and shoot shooter and has shown that for the Utah Jazz this year. And if the Magic are looking to keep that playoff push and kind of go in all now, kind of checking in for two guys in Colin Sexton and Svi Mykhailiuk, I think would be beneficial deals to add for their roster for the win now and for the future as well. And when you look at the Utah Jazz side of things here, they get Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, and Jet Howard. The Utah Jazz, obviously being towards the bottom of the Western Conference, are not a top tier team. So them obviously getting some experienced players in Jet Howard, one that hasn't been able to show his true potential on this Orlando Magic team, would be nice. And also acquiring another pretty solid shot creator in Cole Anthony. He's taken a little bit of a step back, and I would say Colin Sexton is a little bit of an upgrade. But Cole Anthony could still blossom, could still be a nice piece for Utah or for another team potentially in the future. They also get a veteran in Gary Harris, who could also help out. Ultimately, the Orlando Magic have too many guards with Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, KCP, Cole Anthony, Jet Howard, and Gary Harris. And ultimately, condensing 3 of those guards for 2 of them could help them out in finding some easier rotations and getting some nice solidified roles for these players gearing up for the playoffs. Trade number 2 would be involving the Indiana Pacers and the Phoenix Suns. And in this trade, the Indiana Pacers would be acquiring shooter Grayson Allen, while the Phoenix Suns would be acquiring wing Obi Toppin. And for this deal, like I said, I think it works for both teams. Suns, obviously, similar to the Orlando Magic, have a numerous amount of guards and similar guards that play similar positions. Guys like Tyus Jones, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Grayson Allen, Monte Morris, all play in that Suns backcourt. And unfortunately, they need some variance within this team. So trading a player like Grayson Allen could definitely help that, as he's obviously been a top tier shooter last year, but has taken a little bit of a step back with decreased minutes and decreased stats in his diminished role coming off the bench this season. Acquiring a player in Obi Toppin brings a skill set to the Suns that they don't necessarily have on this roster. A rebounding defensive wing. Ryan Dunn's a great defending type of wing. Kevin Durant's a great superstar shooting type of wing. Royce O'Neal 3-and-D as well, but more of a perimeter player. Toppin brings some different type of looks and also can run you some different variations if you want to run him in this starting lineup as well. And for the Pacers, acquiring a player in Grayson Allen is key, as they rank towards the bottom in three-point shooting. And even though they don't value three-point shooting, adding another one of those players on the wing here to play alongside either Tyrese Halliburton or to get catch and shoot passes from guards like Andrew Nembhard running with the second unit or TJ McConnell would be very, very clutch to add some different types of skill sets to their roster, while also still being able to not leave a hole as they have young guys like Jarris Walker and Isaiah Jackson who are developing at that power forward position who could fill in and step up for Obi Toppin's role. Third trade that I would like to break down, and is one that I've seen around the sphere as well, but it involves Kevin Herter and Trey Lyles going to the Sacramento or to the Washington Wizards from Sacramento, and the Sacramento Kings acquiring Kyle Kuzma. And the Kings have obviously been a topic of discussion on the trade front as they had a little bit of a shaky start to the season, but after firing Mike Brown and running with Doug Christie, they've been really, really good. So ultimately, do the Kings need to make a shakeup move? Maybe not, but they have been in the market for a wing, particularly eyeing guys like Pascal Siakam and Jeremy Grant dating back to last season, and entering this season being interested in Cam Johnson. But with Cam Johnson being touted by other teams around the league, and also being a pretty high value player, getting priced at 2 first-round picks, I do think it will be very, very difficult for the Sacramento Kings to want to gauge up all that future and to trade all that assets as well. Specifically, with the Nets having multiple interests from other teams, they could possibly get a better offer. But a player that plays very similarly to Cam Johnson in a role is Kyle Kuzma, as Kuzma is also going to be that solid shot maker, that stretch forward for you on the 3-point line. He's a little bit more of a post player compared to a guy in Cam Johnson, but I still think he's going to bring you some solid value in that 3-point shooting, which is something that they've been a little bit diminished this year, which has really helped out their game over the last couple of seasons. Having a high 3-point percentage is what's kept them in these games and keep them in with their fluid offense. So adding a player in Kuzma like that could be nice. In Washington this year, they've been running with a lot of their rookies and a lot of their young guys. So a player like Kuzma has been able to fit, hasn't been able to showcase his skills. But his recent performance versus the Phoenix Suns, he dropped 30 points, in which said he just wanted to play his own game. So I think that if he went to Sacramento playing with guys like DeRozan, playing with guys like Fox, like Sabonis. Yes, he's not an immediate impact player, but I think he could be a key role player that could help out in things they need. And for the Wizards, ultimately, there would be some draft capital attached to this trade as well, but they'd be getting the draft capital that they want, taking on the contract of Kevin Herter as it only has 1 more year left. They could use him, possibly use him as another tradable asset in the future, and taking on an expiring contract of Trey Lyles just to take the money on. For the Wizards, they obviously are more incentivized by the draft capital and moving off Kuzma, while the Kings are looking for an upgrade at the forward. Now, I won't lie to you guys, these last two are probably the most creative, so I want to know your thoughts down below. But let's get into it as I cooked up this deal here between the Detroit Pistons and the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, this one does involve some draft capital, but the Pistons would be acquiring Brandon Ingram and Javonte Green in this deal for Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., a first round pick in 2026 via Detroit, a 2025 Wizards second rounder, and a 2027 Dallas second rounder. Now, I don't know ultimately how much Brandon Ingram would go for on the market here, but the Pelicans, similar to the Utah Jazz, have been a team towards the bottom this season, not by choice, but due to the fact of injuries. DeJounte Murray suffered an injury early on, Zion, Brandon Ingram, and amongst others as well, but Brandon Ingram is still suffering that injury as we speak. So for a team wanting to trade him, specifically when Brandon Ingram wants a big contract, it is a little bit risky. But I do believe a team like the Detroit Pistons are a team that should be intrigued by players like this. The Pistons, obviously, this season have seen a rise in their obviously development with Cade Cunningham addressing the need of adding some shooters and scorers, but adding a secondary scorer for this team specifically with Jaden Ivey out for an extended period of time, I think is key. And I've seen them possibly linked to players like Bradley Beal, possibly a Zach Levine, but ultimately I think a guy in Brandon Ingram would ultimately solve their holes. You plug him in the small forward position, he could play alongside Cade. He's not going to take over too much at the guard problem. And ultimately, I think if the Pistons want to be, a team that is contending and wants to be competing, trading for a player like Ingram who wants a contract is the right needed move. You go out, you get a player that is a little bit frustrated, who you can bring in, and then hopefully can make you appreciate the city. It's not like Brandon Ingram's going to choose you as a free free agent destination. And for the Pelicans, ultimately, they get some expiring contracts in Tim Hardaway Jr. to free up some salary. Tobias Harris, possibly a contract they could reroute this year or possibly next season. But ultimately, once again, they're doing it for the draft capital because if they get a high lottery pick this season, they could ultimately go into a little bit of a rebuild with some of their young guys with their first round pick this season. Obviously, Trey Murphy, Jordan Hawkins, Herbert Jones, and build with that core. But lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we got a three-team deal here. And this one is the most creative out of them all. The Miami Heat acquire Bruce Brown Jr. The Raptors acquire PJ Tucker and Terrence Mann, while the Clippers acquire Terry Rozier. And this one, like I said, is very creative. And there would be draft capital being thrown, back and forth between these teams. But I didn't know what they would be valued at. But looking at it from contractually wise, the Heat are interested in Bruce Brown, interested in a deal around him for obviously Jimmy Butler, but obviously using him as a 5 team while also trying to get Middleton makes it very, very restrictive. So if I'm the Miami Heat, I'm not interested in a Bruce Brown deal for Jimmy Butler, but I'm definitely interested in a Bruce Brown deal to reshape my roster after this trade to acquire whatever I get for shipping out Jimmy Butler. And if the rumors are true that they're going to possibly get a guy like Chris Middleton and possibly another other asset like that, adding another piece like Bruce Brown to replace the defense of Jimmy Butler is key. I think Bruce Brown and Middleton is the perfect replacement for Butler. You got the scoring that Butler provides basically as a mid-range scorer that Middleton brings, and Middleton's a little bit better from the three-point range, even though he's a little bit older. And Bruce Brown brings that physicality and that defense and the ability to kind of play 2, 3, 4 for this team. I like that for all aspects, and I truly think that the Raptors are willing to move off a player in Bruce Brown. So acquiring a player like that would be nice. If we want to dive back and look back at the trade, like I mentioned, the Clippers would be getting Terry Rozier here. And the reason why I sent Terry to the Clippers and not to the Raptors is because there's no need for the Raptors really to want him. And I do believe other teams would be interested in a player in Terry Rozier. He hasn't really fit in with this Miami team offensively, but I do believe with the Clippers, maybe he could be a nice scorer off the bench where he was primarily successful with Boston, or ultimately he could play alongside some defensive guards and Chris Dunn and be a pretty solid change of pace for this Clippers team offensively at that guard position. And obviously, the Raptors would be getting some draft capital, but the Raptors are obviously going to be taking the bad contracts in this deal. They're taking PJ Tucker, who they're most likely going to waive on an expiring deal, but also taking an intriguing piece in Terrence Mann. Now, Mann, obviously, was a highly coveted piece by the 76ers in some deals, highly coveted amongst many other teams, but ultimately was never moved and was just re-signed an extension, but hasn't really been able to find his home with the Los Angeles Clippers this season. And I truly do believe that if Clippers want to give this last push with Kawhi, with James Harden, because they truly can in this Western Conference, with Zubac, with some of their nice role players that they did replace with Paul George, moving off some of these bad contracts and possibly moving off an intriguing piece in Terrence Mann could get that deal done to bring in a player like Terry Rozier. Now, obviously, like I said, there would be draft capital going to the Raptors as well. That's their main incentive. They wanted to get off Bruce Brown last year, were unfortunate and unable to, but this season, that seems like their main goal. Move off Bruce Brown, then possibly look at other guys like Boucher or Olynyk, but Bruce Brown is the main agenda. But like I said, we looked at 5 trades in this video. Like I said, all trades that I think benefit every party involved. And I want to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. So let me know what you guys ultimately think on these trades. If you guys like them, if you dislike them, if you think they're fair, if you think they're not fair, if you're a fan of one of these teams. Ultimately, let me know if you would be personally intrigued on doing a deal involved in one of the deals that I did bring up. And if you want to see another one of these videos, let me know also as well down below in the comment section. I got a lot of trade ideas and I'd love to cook them up for y'all. Like I said, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.